Hi, this is Simon Drew, and you're listening to the Walled Garden Podcast. This show belongs to the podcast network of the Walled Garden Philosophical Society, an international community of philosophers and seekers dedicated to the pursuit of truth, wisdom, virtue, and the divine, wherever they may be found. To find out more, go to thewalledgarden.com. But for now, let's caretake the gardens of our minds, one meaningful conversation at a time. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Walled Garden Podcast. So the guest who I have on today is none other than Brandon Tumblin. Many of you will know Brandon because he's been on the show before, and he's also the host of the Strong Stoic Podcast, which I know that many of you will also be listening to. Brandon is a true modern Stoic. He's really aiming up. He's really a person who I love to spend time with. I love to be around people like Brandon because he's energized about reinvigorating people's lives with the power of philosophy. And it's for that reason and many, many more that I decided to officially ask Brandon to not only bring his podcast under the umbrella of the Walled Garden Podcast Network, but also to work with us in the Walled Garden. He's a project manager as well. He's extremely organized and he's very helpful with, development of ideas and projects. And so he's now actually the director of community in the Walled Garden Philosophical Society. And we are so honored to have him on board in that capacity and many more. I'm going to praise Brandon a little bit more in the intro when we start having this conversation, as you'll hear soon. So I won't spend too much time other than to say that I consider Brandon to be a brother of mine. I consider him to be a true seeker of wisdom, a seeker of knowledge, a seeker of understanding. And it's always a pleasure to talk to him. And what you'll hear in today's episode is what we might call a general philosophical discussion. I love having conversations with people where I feel very comfortable to not prepare questions, to not prepare any, should we talk about this? Should we talk about that? No, let's dive in and just see where the conversation goes. And that's the kind of conversation that we have today. So I'm sure that there will be many twists and turns, but I know that you guys are going to get something really beautiful out of this episode today. And before we dive in, I do want to just quickly talk about tomorrow's event that we have coming up in the Walled Garden Philosophical Society, because we were going to be having a session with Sharon LaBelle. She was going to be talking about philosophy and music, a dialogue and a dance. But unfortunately, I just heard from Sharon this morning, she's had some circumstances come up where she's got to reschedule that event. She won't be able to host it, but nonetheless, I'm going to take the event tomorrow. We're going to keep on that theme of philosophy and music. It's something that I'm extremely interested in, and it's something that I believe can be so informative. Music can really be such a beautiful pathway to wisdom, to understanding, and it can inform our philosophical study and practice. Just in the same way that I would say, if you're a musician, you need to be learning philosophy as well, because it's going to inform how you approach the instrument, how you approach music, how you approach playing. And so I'm really excited. This is a topic that I'm prepared to handle, because I absolutely love thinking about these things. And I imagine we'll be learning some stuff tomorrow from Miles Davis and some of the great, modern musicians as well, and the way that they approach their creative practice, but the philosophy behind that creative practice. So we would love to see you there. We're going to be meeting at the usual time of 3 p.m. PST, that's California time, and we would love to see you there. I'm going to put the link in the show notes to where you can register for that. But for now, I just want to dive into this conversation. Brandon is an incredible guy. I absolutely adore him, and it's so great to have him on board with us in the Walled Garden Philosophical Society, and I thank him again. So enjoy this conversation, a general philosophical discussion between myself and Brandon Tumblin of the Strong Stoic Podcast. Enjoy. Look, I want to say a few things first. I want to give you some praise, because, in building the Walled Garden, we've got such a long way to go with everything that we want to achieve. But at the same time, man, it is so cool to see that already we have such a phenomenal group of, philosophers, psychologists, people who are interested in theology, people who are interested in all kinds of different religions and philosophies, and bringing them all together. And the cool thing is that we can all come together and really agree on a few core values. And then we say, you know what, let's get out there and really make a difference in people's lives through the work that we do. And it's an evolving project, but I just want to thank you for accepting my call, you might say, to come and join us, because ever since meeting you, I've just found you to be somebody who genuinely wants to make a difference in the world and wants to seek understanding and truth and wisdom, and to not just have it be an intellectual pursuit, but something that you embody within yourself, within your life. And so there's your little bit of praise from me, but I just want to thank you. And this is cool. This is our first official podcast recording between you and me, when you're in as a contributor in the Walled Garden and as head of content and community. So Brandon, thanks, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much, Simon, for the kind words. I think that's one of the things that I admire about you, is you're not afraid to give out praise, or to tell people when they're doing something good. And I think we need a bit more of that. I mean, obviously there's a thing about truth and saying the hard truths, but I think equally we need to say the good truths. I've recently had this epiphany, actually, in my research for the Dostoevsky episode, that Josh Bertolotti, I went on his podcast and he asked me how Dostoevsky would define wisdom. I didn't know, but I started talking and I started stumbling, and I came to, well, I think he would just define wisdom as knowing your darkness and your light. And so I think maybe for a little while I was probably a bit too focused on the darkness, but I think equally wisdom is knowing what you're capable of, your divinity. And so I appreciate the kind words, and I think you do a great job of dishing that out. And also I would agree. I mean, we have a great team coming together, and I'm so excited. I mean, I look around the table and I'm excited and sometimes even intimidated by some of the names we have in the group, but it's an unbelievable opportunity, and I can't thank you enough for for the invitation.
No, man. It was always going to be there, because and there's so many people who I want to come on board, even still, like this is our initial team, but it's funny, when we put the intention out there, we're going to start this movement, we're going to start talking to each other and trying to solve some of these important issues philosophically and have conversations. I mean, we put the intentionality out there and people just come out of the woodworks, like I've been talking to even more people who are saying, oh, I kind of saw what you were doing at the start, but I'm really interested, like what, and people wanting to come on board and help. And the cool thing is as well, this is the number of people. It's interesting. I've talked to a few people who are academics, philosophers, particularly academics, who look at what we're doing and they say, this looks like what philosophy is supposed to be about: building community, bringing great philosophers together. David Feidler's talked to me about how it's really in line with the philosophical garden tradition, except it's in a digital space, and we want that to go into a physical space eventually. But and I speak to academics who are in the academic world who are like, wow, this looks way better than the academy, as in the approach to philosophy, putting it out there to everyday people to listen to and to engage with. So, but that idea, man, of understanding your light as well has been on my mind. And maybe this is where we'll because I know that you and we're going to be talking divinity. We're going to be talking that spark of divinity within, the light within. Something I was always taught growing up, man, and this has been on my mind for the past couple of years, especially as a Mormon. They teach all these kids, like, never hide your light, let it shine. The biblical verse is something like, a man does not light a lamp and hide it under a bushel, So I think that what I'd love for the Walled Garden to turn into eventually, and just what I want for each individual who's working with us, or for each individual who's supporting us and being a seeker alongside us philosophers, is to show people, A, that they do have a light, B, that we're living in a time where it's more necessary than ever for that light to shine forth, and also just helping people to not feel so shitty about letting that light shine forth. Like, what's so wrong with aiming at letting every part of you that could be unlocked, become unlocked and shining it out into the world? So I don't know, man. This is our task. This is our mission, and we've got humble beginnings, but we've got great places that we can go.
Well, I think there is something there about a reluctance to shine your light. And, I've done a bit of reflection on why that is. And I'm not sure I really come to any conclusion yet, but it does seem to be that in some ways we are afraid of the good that we could potentially do. And I suppose part of it is that it is a responsibility. If you hold up a light, you have to hold up the light. It's work, it's responsibility. And with that responsibility comes success, hopefully, if you're on the right road, but also failure. And I think part of I think this fear of taking on responsibility is the inevitable failure that's going to happen when you miss the mark from time to time. Right. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a weird thing to tell someone something like that, let your light shine, you got to let it out into the world. And you think about what that practically means. I mean, it's so nuanced, and there are some generalities. I mean, you could always have more kindness in the world. You can always have more genuine connection. You can always be a bit more forgiving to people and even a little generous within your means. But then there's also the task of, well, what is my strength, or what are my strengths as an individual? And I think that's where we get into really what I think maybe the most important light is for most people is, what can you contribute positively to the world? And it's one thing to have a light in the dark and read by yourself, but I think it's another to shine a light that allows everyone else to read as well. And I think probably step one, I mean, it depends how dark of a place you're in. Step one might be getting a light strong enough to guide you through some of that darkness. But step two is most certainly shining it so that other people can benefit from it as well. And I think that's the ultimate goal that we're trying to achieve, for sure. And I think most people should probably aim towards.
Yeah, I don't know if you talked with Rocco about this, but he talks a lot about, he taught me about this kind of spiritual principle of the magic that can happen when you receive in order to give, So every success that you have is immediately a success for everybody that you're networked with, because you want to give that out to them. And I think um, really that's, as a philosophical society, that's the job of every individual within our organization, is to receive every opportunity that they could receive to learn, grow, get stronger, wiser, become more successful in every possible way that they can, that would be good for them, their families, for us, and to share that success among those who, and Rocco talks a lot about this with me. It just, you know, uh, not all of us are on the kind of same playing field with our, you might say, material success in the world, but because we're all agreeing on this intentionality of, sharing philosophy, and we're working together as a team now, uh, we all rise when one of us rises. And I think it's interesting because don't you feel like it's really easy to get, I've been here so many times in my life, and still continue to try and I'm continuing to try and get out of this pattern of thinking, but it's like a scarcity mindset. I know that's kind of like a cheesy new agey sort of term, but it really is the case that sometimes you can just go so inside yourself and think like, anything that I get, I have to hold on to, otherwise I might not have it for that long. Or maybe it's something that comes from, having generations go through poverty before you or something like that, or struggling to really make it in the world, that anything that, comes to you, you want to hold on to it, make sure that you can save it. But I think that as I have networked with more people, and as I have learned how to integrate myself into society on a deeper level, it's so much more fun, and it's also so much more rewarding to share whatever success that you have with as many people as you can find who would receive that success well. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely, man. I think I definitely can relate to that. You learn a philosophical piece of wisdom, or you gain something
Yeah.
valuable, and you just feel like, oh, if I tell everybody about this, then I lose what makes me special. And so there's this, I think part of it is an ego thing, right? Where we want to feel like we are special, and we want to feel like maybe have something that other people don't. But I think it's very short-sighted, because I think that the best thing that you can possibly do, even if it is just a selfish endeavor, the best thing for you is to share that knowledge. It helps other people, but what it does is it also opens you to the opportunity of receiving things from other people, right?
Mm.
This is an exchange, and it shouldn't be seen as an exchange, but it's not necessarily the case that just because you don't, just because you don't share something, that you're not going to benefit from it. If
Yeah.
you share your wisdom with someone else, or if you share your success and your strengths with other people, you're going to get some kind of effect back. That's this ebb and flow, this give and take of life. And really, I suppose the best way to visualize it is, it's like a tide that rises all boats, right?
Mm.
So it's not, part of what I think this is that we all sometimes feel like we're in competition with each other. And maybe in some ways that's true. But I think fundamentally, when we're all agreeing on a mission, when we're all agreeing on making the world a better place, that goal starts to take precedence over our individual success. And so then you have things like teams coming together, like we're doing at the Walled Garden, and we all have our own priorities, and we all have our own motives and ways of life, but we're all looking up at this same star, and so we're moving towards that. And when you do that, me benefiting, or something that that can benefit me, it also benefits you, because we're on the same team. And I think the end goal of philosophy is to consider the fact that maybe all of humanity is on the same damn team. And maybe
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
division is just a facade. It's not real. It's something that
Mm.
we make up in our heads because of ego, because we're scared, because of this, because of that. But that maybe over time, the worthy goal, the worthiest goal, is shared humanity with every single person.
Mm. Yeah, man. I mean, everybody wants the same things fundamentally, Um, and then there's all these superficialities that we stack on top of the fundamentals. And the superficialities are like, it's almost like it's the it's the leaves and sticks and branches that have fallen from the forest canopy down on top of the forest floor that keeps you from seeing the flaw that is keeping us all alive. And but it's funny,
Right.
like Jim Rohn, he had this great piece of wisdom. He said, if you learn something great, you should share that piece of wisdom with 10 people. And the good thing about that is each of those 10 people, they hear the wisdom once. So it's really good for them, but you get to hear it 10 times. He's like,
Mhm.
you get to hear that 10 times and it's going to seep into you, into who you are as you share it with more people. And I think you've probably found this as well. Like, tell me if you found this, that the public service of doing a podcast and just speaking into the void and hoping that you catch a few people who are interested in what you have to say, and you know by God, hoping that you say something that's actually genuinely useful, right? But
Right.
it's such a great exercise in learning how to share and also how to receive, because people will cling on to what you're saying and I think, yeah, this guy's actually doing something cool. I really like it. I'll support this person. But I've just found that it has completely um, turned my life around because it's forced me to say, well, I have to learn, I have to grow, and I have to share. And those three elements, learn, grow, share, repeat, learn, grow, share, repeat, learn, grow, share, repeat. It's like it's the best possible system for personal growth. And, you know, uh, it's just completely been beneficial for me in every possible way. And it's taught me who I am. And, one of my friends says that when you finish a book, it naturally leads you to finding another book. Like,
Mm.
the book will inform what you want to learn next. And I've found that from day one, pressing record on my podcast, let's go, it's been a series of twists and turns that I could never have imagined that I would be here talking to somebody who is a part of a philosophical organization that we've set up, you know, uh, 4 years ago. I could never have imagined that. But this is what happens when you get out there and you start talking and you start sharing. And it's um it's interesting because for me it's just taught me, like, what's the limit, really? What's the limit of human communication and genuinely just wanting to be there for people because you want them to grow and learn as well. So I don't know, it's been incredibly positive, and I just think it's such an interesting thing to think about, just get out there and share what you have with whoever you can share it with and see what happens. I don't know.
Oh, I've had the same experience. It was weird for me, I suppose. One of the reasons I started my podcast personally was because I couldn't really find a whole lot of people in my area that had the same the same love of wisdom. I mean, you can always find those people, but I found it. Well, I was at the time I was actually living in Quebec, so there was a bit of a language barrier because uh, I'm not proficient in French. I speak intermediate French. I'm not proficient enough to talk about some of these deep ideas
Mm,
we talk about. But so there's a bit of a language barrier there. But it was also through COVID as well that I sort of was thinking about this, and I honestly I feel like it was like shining, like just trying to hold up a lighter and see what comes to me. That's kind of like looking back, that's really what I was doing. I wouldn't really at the time, I just wanted to process some of these, these thoughts and some of the spiritual journey that I was on, and maybe hopefully someone could take some benefit from that.
mm,
And that happened really slowly. I mean, I'm on year 2 next month, but never in a million years did I think that, Kai Whiting would reach out to me and want to come on my little podcast at the time, and
mm,
never would I have thought that would have led me to chat with you, and then to and really Kai was one of the first. Kai was my second guy on the podcast, and he really opened me up to
mm,
having guests on, because that was the other thing. I didn't. It was a solo podcast for a long time. So talk about like independence, right?
Yeah.
And so he kind of helped me open this idea that actually no, it's not a bad thing to, to have to talk with other people. It's a good thing, and that has benefited me so much. But I have the same feeling that as you, where you never really know where you're going to go, and you don't really know what the upper limit is of some of the things you do when you start them. You just kind of got to start it with good intentions and pay attention to quality and try and get better, and be genuine and just be yourself, and see what comes, like see what comes to you. And while doing this, you're reaching out to guests, and you have to make yourself known. But I'll maybe bounce this lyric off you and see where it goes. But there's this lyric from a song. You have to leave it all behind you. Give the sun a chance to find you. And I think that that's what a lot of us have to do, is to
Mm.
give the sun a chance to find you. How can you have any sunlight if you're in the shade? I don't know. What does that mean anything to you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. Give the chances. Yeah, give the sun a chance to find you. It's interesting. I I'm going to go to my personal experience because it's what I know. Um, I think that idea really resonates with me because there was a point there where I started to strip away the layers that I had um, held on to growing up. We live in like a really hyper fragmented society where there's not a lot of Renaissance people around. People who are very interested in music and the arts and philosophy and theology and spirituality and bringing all these things, architecture, all these things together, poetry. It's hyper fragmented because you go to university. Well, at least this is the thing in Australia. It's kind of like you have this broad education growing up. Then you go to university, you specialize a little bit more. Then you go, to do your master's and you're specializing a little bit more. And then you go to do your doctorate. And by the end, you're like really, really, really good at one thing, or really, really, really knowledgeable in one area. And that's great because it's really good to have experts about everything. And like we're so unbelievably powerful today. It's incredible. But there's also power in stripping away those layers sometimes. And like you say, letting the sun find you, as in, who am I really? What do I really want to explore? I've had a difficult time at university doing my Master of Divinity because as a highly creative person, man, I don't want to learn ABC that they're giving me to learn. I want to go out and do my own research projects on the things that I'm really interested in that I know will not even seem like work to me because I just am so excited about figuring this stuff out. But there's such a path laid out. And so there was a time for me when I started to realize, hang on, I've called myself a jazz singer and trumpeter for a few years now. But what does that even mean? Like I have a degree in jazz singing and trumpet playing, but I'm not that. I'm a musician first. So what does that mean? Oh, I can learn piano, and I did that over the past 3 years. I've been learning the piano. Past 2 years actually, self learning, and it has been one of the most deeply meaningful experiences of my entire life. I've done the same thing with didgeridoo now to the point where I feel comfortable, maybe going out and doing some concerts with the didgeridoo, and even with poetry, I never knew I was a poet until I stripped away those layers and started to think, hang on, I'm just a creative individual. And there's obviously something trying to get out here. Why don't I stop trying to put these boxes around what it is and just let whatever it is become what it could be? And that was the most important thing that I ever did, to let the light actually find me. And that's how it felt as well. It felt as though the light had found me and I had found it. And I knew myself so much better. But man, I couldn't have got there unless I, like you say, like actually allowed room within myself to receive what it was that was going to be channeled through me onto the page, through the instrument, whatever it is. So yeah, I don't know. Have you found like similar? What does it mean to you?
Well, yeah, there's a few thoughts there I want to cling on to.
Mm,
So, first of all, I think one of the most important things you said there, I'm not gonna use your words, I'll use my words, but you have like a hierarchy of identity. And
mm.
so when you're talking about, okay, I'm a I'm a trumpet player, but before that you were a musician. You do the same thing actually. Really good athletes will do this. I know you're in the gym as well, but really good athletes when they
Oh, I am not in the
specialize.
gym. I'll stop you there. Okay. I let my body go when I went on the spiritual path.
Okay, okay. You used to be in the
but
gym.
but I'm getting back there. I'm doing runs now. We have like a car park here and I run up and down the car park levels, and I'm
Yeah.
getting back into it because I recognize that spirituality not embodied is yeah. Anyway, but
Yeah,
the point,
yeah.
go on.
But yeah, so but what athletes will do is they normally specialize into something. So running, or you'll specialize into a strength sport like Olympic weightlifting, which I have done. But the really good ones don't just do that. The real good athletes, they're an athlete first. Before they're an Olympic weightlifter, before they're a runner, they're an athlete first. And what that means is when you're an athlete, there's certain things you should be able to do. You should be able to run. You should be able to jump. You should be strong. You should have a bit of endurance. You should have, like there's these qualities that make an athlete. And that's the things that you have to consider when you're being an athlete. And it's funny because you might think that the best way to be a good trumpet player is to only play the trumpet. And I don't think that's true. I think that's a false idea. I think the best way to be a trumpet player is to specialize with the trumpet, but to be a generalist musician as well. The Russians in weightlifting figured this out long ago. But it's mind blowing to me that the best way sometimes to be a specialist in something is to not just do that thing. And
Mm,
so you can take that structure. So you have musician and trumpet player, piano player, everything underneath that. And then if you think about like what's most important to you as an individual, what's at the top of your identity hierarchy? And I think as Stoics, it's something like be a good person. It's
mm,
something like that, right? And that is so open-ended. It's
mm,
so open-ended because you are a different person than I am, and you can experience that path in a completely different way than I can. And that's it's kind of reassuring. It's kind of fun. I mean, you think about that, it might sound like, well, what the hell do I choose? And fair enough, right? Because it's a hard question. Where do I go? How do I experience this spiritual journey? And it's really, I think, it's guided by your interest. It's whatever you're interested in. And so
mm,
I think sometimes that can be hard to do. And when you start peeling back these masks, as you talk about, that's what you're going to find. You're going to find what you're genuinely interested in. When
mm,
you have these masks, when you're trying to portray yourself as what you think society wants you to be like, the consequence of that is that you no longer know what you are actually like. Identity and who you are and what you're interested in is something that you don't just know. You quote quote your soul knows, your spirit knows, your inner essence knows, but you don't really know. And so that's something you have to discover. And the best way to discover that is by taking off those masks to really allow yourself to be open to the experience and to follow what's interested in you. So that's kind of like on this path of self-discovery and growth, the whole thing that you just talked about earlier.
mm, mm. I love it, man. I mean, I wonder, you talk about that kind of identity hierarchy. Um, I've often wondered, uh, can that hierarchy dissolve into one guiding principle? Like Seneca, he talks about how the wise man always desires the same things and rejects the same things, and therefore they are always the same person no matter where they are. And I've talked to Rocco about this sort of stuff as well because you know he talked to me at one point. I have a very um, I do have a very fragmented mind. I think that has to do with just general creativity as an individual, but also, I grew up in the Mormon church, so I was a Mormon for most of my life. And then when I kind of fell away from the church, well, hang on, am I still a Mormon? How much of me is still Mormon? How much of me is now in this new landscape? And then going to university, well, I'm a student now and I have to be this person to these people. I have to be this person at home because I'm still around Mormons, and I have to be this person over here. And then, when I fragmented even more into, oh, gosh, okay, I'm a poet, I'm a musician, I'm trying to start this thing, I'm trying to start that thing. And how can you unify all that? Because that's a lot of cognitive energy that is being spent trying to play the puppet game of, well, I'm this person over here and this person over there. But Rocco has this saying, he says, I don't want to be wrong for 1 second longer than I need to be. Now, that's a great singular guiding principle for your life that could unify every part of you. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if that's my one guiding principle, then my singular job in life is to figure out how I can update my operating system at any one moment to better interact with the reality that is presenting itself to me in that moment. And so I just wonder about the power of these. Another one that he has is what is it? If the way is not always seeking better ways, then it's not the universal way.
Right.
It's not the way. And that's a great guiding principle to say, oh, okay, yeah, okay. So my singular job in life is to seek better ways at all times, seek better ways in my relationships, in my career, in my community contributions, in my personal philosophy. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm interested in how you unite all the parts of yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I part of me has thought in the past that that skeleton, I think, is what you're talking about, like this structure that you can take and really bring it through your whole life. I've often thought that that's actually what stoicism is. And maybe I'm completely wrong. And maybe this is just me being arrogant as a guy with stoic in his podcast name. But it seems to me to be the case that one of the things that people have issues with stoicism is they feel like it's not very specific. It's not very exact in what it means. And that's exactly what you're talking about there. That it's a benefit and it's a drawback. When you have something that's really abstract, like that idea that Rocco presents, you lose context. You don't have the details. It's not it's not an instruction manual on how to deal with every little situation in life. So you have to really embody it and provide context. And with that, you need wisdom to do that properly. Um, so I do think that if you look at stoicism, it seems to be that very structure, virtue ethics. Okay, be a good person fundamentally. What do we care about? We care about being strong, having fortitude. We care about justice. We care about all things in moderation. You define the bare minimum that you need, and then you can take that structure and really, I think, build pretty much anything with it. The problem, again, that's very beneficial for a lot of people. The problem with that is that you have to fill in the blanks for a lot of this stuff. So even in Rocco's idea there, my way is to seek better ways. Well, what do you mean by better ways? What's the end goal? You have to provide like all that context around it. I do 100% agree that these one guiding principles are valuable. However, I do think that that's very specific to an individual. And with that comes context that most of us don't see. So when Rocco says that statement, it means something different to him than it does to you or I.
Totally. Yes.
Because of his life's experience, because of how he thinks about each of these words. And that's not a good or bad thing. It's an abstract line. And because of his contextual situation, he knows exactly what that means. So maybe my message would be, we should probably look for those, but beware of context.
Well, I don't know if it's about knowing exactly what it means. I think it's about preparing yourself to at least be interested in the question, as in his life journey is definitely not the same as mine. We are interlinked in the same way that I'm interlinked with all of you, but each of us have our own paths that we're walking. And so the next step is not going to look the same to any of us, but it's about saying, well, I'm not the singular points along the way. I'm the thing that moves from A to B, or I'm the thing that discerns how to best move from A to B. Do you know what I mean? But I think you're right. Like Stoicism provides people with a set of guiding principles and understandings about the fundamentals of reality that makes intuitive sense to a lot of people. I think that's what's so beautiful about it. And that should be the case. A good philosophy should make intuitive sense to people because it's like awakening a part of ourselves that we maybe forgot. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, how do we become better at being that? Well, I think of it like this. Behind us is an infinite past. Now, there's a finite past that we call our lives. And so that finite past that is our lives and the infinite past that is eternity is behind us. And we can kind of look to that through history books. We can look to that through our own experiences. Great. But then ahead of us is the infinite future. Now we've got our own particular a particular future, which may be 2 seconds, maybe 20 years, maybe 50 years. But then we've got the eternal future. And this is interesting. You've got my mind going now. This is
Love it, man.
okay. So I often talk to my clients about how you are that tiny little pinpoint in between the infinite past and the infinite future. Now, what does that mean about what we are? Well, we are the discernment mobile. you know, this moving piece that is constantly in need of better wisdom to be able to deal with what is about to happen, right? And that's learning what you are, because you're this little thing right here in between infinite past and infinite future. You know, what's your purpose? Learn how to utilize the best of what you know from the past in order to invest that into how you act in the future. And I wonder if this is we talk about, I'd like your opinion on this Stoic idea that eventually you will almost identify with the cosmos, as in the beautiful order that is everything, because you'll recognize that every single thing that you do does actually, by necessity, affect everything else that happens, and you have incredibly far-reaching consequences for your actions. And so we have to take care of the immediate. We have to take care of the short-term future. We have to take care of the future that is us when we're 80 years old and maybe have no money and we need something to put away for that. And then on one sense, you flip over into the realm of the divine, which is the infinite, the totality, and you say, what do I need to do to take care of the totality as well? And that's almost like this idea that the Stoics have of, well, wisdom is a knowledge of things human and divine. What needs to be done on earth, what needs to be done in heaven, or what is done in heaven. So I don't know. It's for me, I think about that, how we are so interconnected that we really do affect infinity. We do affect eternity in some real sense. That's at least the way that it seems to me. But what do you think?
Yeah, this idea of maybe the end goal of philosophy to be that realization, to feel that interconnection with not everyone, not just everyone, but everything. That very true. I just spoke with Sharon LaBelle. She was on the Strong Stoic, and we spoke about that a lot of philosophers get into philosophy because of something like loneliness, and that leads them away from men. From a very brief period of time, they go away, they get in touch with themselves, they learn, they try and find wisdom, they try and be virtuous, and then eventually it leads them back to humanity. It leads them back to other people. And that, I mean, it's good for them. It's good for them, but it's also a form of salvation for them as well. And I haven't quite wrapped my head around what that exactly means. That was an idea from Nietzsche, actually, that I'm reading now. But yeah, I would agree. And I think that this recognizing where you are in the cosmos, or that you play a role in the cosmos, you use the word beautiful order, right? Which is, I think, what cosmos means if you were to translate
According
it
to
properly.
David Feidler, anyway, he told me about that.
Yeah, for sure. When I think about this idea of cosmos and fitting in, I think about it more as harmony. And I think you're gonna like this. I thought a lot about harmony a few months ago, and I related it to one of the things that I understand, which is music. The thing about harmony is that in a musical sense is that you don't need to, not everyone's doing the same thing. If we're in a band, I'm not playing the same instrument as you. And if I am, I'm probably not playing the same notes. If you are harmonizing me through your voice, if we're singing together, you're not playing the same notes. You're different. But together it's beautiful. Together it's harmony. And I think that's a really key message, because I think a lot of times we think, and I felt like this in the past, where you might be in a friend group or you might be in your family and you feel different. You feel different and you feel like there's a lack of connection there. But I've actually, my understanding now is I flipped that and said, well, why the hell do you think you want to be the same as everyone else for you to be in harmony? That's not true. That's not
Mhm.
true. A G chord is not 6 G notes. Why would you expect to be the same as everyone else if you want to live in harmony? And I want to end, I'll let you bounce this off you really fast. There's a musician that I love. I might have told you this before, but it's a beautiful sentiment. He does solo concerts now. He used to be in a big band, but he does solo stuff now. And he loves it when people sing at his little get-togethers. And it's always small venues because he likes the intimacy and the personal touch. And he always encourages people to sing. And I was at one of these little concerts, and he said, I want everyone to sing. I know some of you are nervous that you're not the best singers. However, if enough people that might not be the best singers, if enough of them choose to sing together, so that something happens, harmony is created.
Mm.
And then I mean, we all know what that feels like when you're at a concert with like thousands of people and then everyone's singing, and if you listen to the guy right next to you, he's like, might not be a great singer. But then if you listen to what's created by everyone's imperfection feeding into this whole system, it's beautiful. It sounds amazing. It's beautiful order. And I don't know, what do you think of that? That sentiment to me is just, it's really touching.
Well, think about all of the major religions wherein singing as a community is one of the most fundamental parts of what they do. And it's one of the most necessary parts of what they do, because
Yeah.
there's just nothing that brings you closer to humanity and to your fellow brothers and sisters than when you are singing together, and we would do this when we were growing up in the Mormon church. It's like, you get together every week and there's always hymns, and there's always somebody who sounds absolutely terrible. And then there's
Mm,
always somebody who has like an opera degree. And so they're like, oh, like
yeah.
they're singing like that. And you're just like, oh my gosh, there's some ego in the room. But when you get a big conference together and everybody's singing, and it's so beautiful. You're right. And there's no admission required. There's no, well, show me a music degree or anything like that. It's just, this is such a fundamental part of what it means to be a human being, that we must do this. And to your point, it's in the same way that an orchestra is a picture of virtue, so is singing in a choir. In fact, singing in a choir is almost an even bigger picture of virtue, because it's directly from our voices, from something that is within, it's embodied, and it's a picture of virtue, because it's like, how good could things get if our societies sounded and looked like a great choir sounds, harmonious, everybody doing their part, and so yeah, I love that idea. And I think, especially in a time like this where things are getting so intense and so hyper fragmented, and we
Mm,
struggle to see each other's perspectives in this time. uh, but if more and more of us can lead by example and show what harmony looks like in a community, in a society, in even just in your local community, who do you need to talk to start getting something up off the ground? Like, go get some friends and do a service project in your local community. uh it's, and we need to pay attention to when we feel harmony within us as well, you know
yeah.
because it doesn't have to be around other people. I feel personally, I appear to be very kind of charismatic and out there. I'm happy for my voice to be out there. But there's nothing that I love more than literally just sitting on the balcony, writing some poetry, listening to some music by myself, solitude, but there's a harmony there. I don't know, we need to learn how to feel the harmony within ourselves. Then we expand that to our relationships, to our families, to our communities, to the society as a whole. And man, we need more of that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think I've noticed I reflect that as well because it's weird because I talk to people. I mean, I meet so many people now because of the podcast, and sometimes it'll come up about personality, and it's surprising for a lot of people to know that I'm actually like most of my talking in the day is like when I'm doing the podcast or when I'm on
Mm.
the phone. But like I love solitude. I love being alone. In fact, today I recorded 2 episodes before coming on with you here, and I was kind of worried because I don't normally talk this much. I'm like, when's my voice going to give out? We all
Yeah.
have a limit, right? But that as well. I mean, that's part of harmony is, as the Stoics say, is living according to your personal nature. Is one of the things living according to nature is, and part of what that means for you is writing poetry alone. I mean that time in solitude, and most people predominantly at least a little bit of solitude. It depends on personality, but how much solitude? So then you have that's kind of like the structure of live according to nature. One of that is living according to human nature. Everyone needs a little bit of solitude, but live according
Mm.
to your personal nature. How much solitude do you need as an individual? And I would say that people sometimes ask like what that feels like. What does eudaimonia feel like? What does harmony feel like? What does flourishing feel like? Which, in my opinion, they all really mean the same thing. And I would say something like that. I mean, I'm going to start using that example, like when you're sitting alone and you feel connected. But in the past, I've always said something like, "Well, have you ever been to a concert where everyone's singing together?
Mm.
Like, have you ever been there? Have you ever been listening to a song and you just have this real deep feeling of meaning?" And like that's what it is. And the idea of philosophy is to take that feeling that you feel when you're at the concert and everyone's singing that their favorite song and to feel and to expand that to your whole life. And it's not something that happens overnight. It has to be
Mm.
it's a combination of aligning your values with your actions with people around you. I mean, there's so many inputs to this thing, but that is what it actually feels like, and it's beautiful.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not easy. Hey, like it's not easy getting out of the prisons which you've put yourself in or that
Yeah.
you've fallen into as you grew up. And I think that this is the ultimate question for us in the world garden, really, is how the hell do I awaken somebody to the possibilities that would lie in front of them if they would just open their eyes? And how do you get somebody to open their eyes to
Mm.
the possibilities of philosophy? Meaning, I'm going to inspect who I am. I'm going to inspect the world around me. I'm going to inspect what what would be the best questions that I could ask and seek to answer for my life right now. Things like that. How do you get people to get out of their own prisons? Because I've been in them. I'm sure you've been in them. I think it's a natural part of maturation is is walking away from the prisons which we have been in, using the keys that have always been on our pockets.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and it's just we have to return to wisdom, like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah.
And so our job really is to lead as many people to water and just see how many people drink. I want to I want to tell you about a scene that's in The Poet and the Sage that I've been thinking a lot about lately because it really relates to this question. Um, it's the dream. It's actually the dream that led me to write The Poet and the Sage. It's this weird, freaky, mystic kind of poetic dream that I took to Sharon LaBelle, and I was like, "What the hell is this, Sharon?" And she was like, "I don't know, but you got to keep on writing." And so it's really the birthplace of a lot of my writings. But in the dream, the poet is beside a pond in the mountains, sitting underneath a fig tree, and he goes and drinks from the waterfall, fills his cup, drinks from the waterfall, immediate enlightenment, just beautiful feeling, incredible. Wow, this is what it feels like to be aligned. I've just drunk from these pure waters of the eternal fountain. And he wants more. And so he goes back, but when he goes back for more, the fountain has stopped flowing. And he's in despair. He's, oh gosh, what, how do I get through this? And he's speaking to the sage in his heart, and he's saying, why does the water stop flowing? And the sage basically says, well, you're going to go drink from the dregs. That's what you're going to do, because the fountain has stopped flowing, but there's still the water there, and it's kind of muddy, and because it's not flowing, it's the dregs. And eventually he does that. He goes and he drinks from the dregs, and he falls in. And what happens is he falls down deep into the dregs of these waters, and it's dark, and there's people clawing, and there's people screaming. It's a very dark dream. He's down there amongst the dead, and he wants to save them, but eventually he sees a light that calls him back up to the surface of the water. And it's this almost like a woman, a light that calls him back to the center. And he's kind of in despair, because he's like, oh my gosh, all these people down there. And then he sees people gathering at the side of the pond, and they're walking down into the water. Just heaps of people walking down into the dregs where all these people are screaming and clawing, trying to get out. And he's in despair. And eventually, he drinks some more water, and then, a few things happen. And eventually he looks over to the pond again, and what he sees, instead of, these dregs, is he sees this pile of bones reaching right up into the heavens. And he can hear these heavenly voices singing from the heights of this pile of bones. And he thinks, I want to go up there. And so he starts climbing, and all these people are climbing up to the top as well. And as he gets to the top, he realizes that everybody who gets to the top gets turned to bones, and those bones form the pile that he's just climbed up. And the voices no longer sing at the top. And he looks down the mountain again, and he sees this light shining again, the woman again. And she calls him back down to sit under the tree. And he really wants to save the people from going up the pile of bones, and he wants to save them and tell them, don't go up there, but nobody's listening. And he wants to save the people who are walking down into the dregs, and he wants to, don't go in there. And he can see that even the woman who is the light is walking with the people down into the dregs, and he wants to save her. And he's just in absolute agony and despair at the fact that nobody listens to him when he says, don't walk down there, or don't go up there. But eventually he goes back into the dregs, and he can't save anybody. And he's just in despair, and he's sitting there, and the light, the woman, comes back and sits next to him. And they just sit there, and they don't talk, and they're just watching as people climb up the pile, or, people go down into the dregs. They're just sitting there. And eventually it gets to the point where he says, this is it. Not to try, but just to sit here by the edge and to contemplate, even as all of this crazy stuff is happening. And, I think something about that message I still haven't fully understood yet, but it's starting to come back to me, that the more you go out there and try to save people, it's almost like that it's just not going to work. You need to sit first. You need to actually observe first. You need to watch what's happening first. You need to be comfortable in your own solitude first. You need to be with yourself first. Then maybe you can do something about it. But if you're just this, constantly trying to yell out, oh, don't go there, don't do this, don't do this, there's something I'm still trying to get from that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll definitely have to think
a
lot more
Sorry,
about that.
I don't mean to just like throw a deep bomb on you there, but I'm working through it.
Good. It's good. I know what you're saying. Part of it is like the blind leading the blind kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Until you're strong enough to lift yourself up, it's very hard to lift up other people. It's part of me wants to think that it kind of gets back to this idea of maybe the most virtuous among us are those who can hold this paradox of taking things seriously, but actually not taking things too seriously.
Mm.
And I've been thinking about this a lot. This maybe that's why it came up, but it almost makes sense to me that we all go into the world, and when we have a cause, you see this in a lot of people that are really like new vegans, for example, and I'm plant based, by the way. I'm like, there's no hate here, but I know when a lot of people get into this, they get really emotional and they want to go save the world, and they go out and they argue with people, and they're outside the slaughterhouses and they're fighting this cause. And I'm in no way saying any of that is bad, but what I'm saying is, you also, at the same time as holding that this is really important, that you want to save these people from going in, you want to save people from burning, essentially,
Yeah.
you have to also hold the paradoxical viewpoint that life isn't so serious.
Mm.
And that's one of the hardest things to do. It's this ebb and flow, because it does seem to be the case. Like you look at people. This is another thing, another idea that Nietzsche had. You have people that come through life and they're noble, and they're this and they're that. But he said, well, they're all missing one thing, and it's that, life is not that serious. Like, don't take it so seriously sometimes, while
Mm.
taking it seriously sometimes. It's a weird dichotomy, and maybe one of the best tests of this is actually laughter. Um,
Mm.
there's this quote by I just oddly, I have it in front of me here, so I'm gonna read the exact quote, which I can never do. But this is a quote from Dostoevsky, actually. If you wish to glimpse inside a human soul and get to know a man, don't bother analyzing his ways of being silent, of talking, of weeping, of seeing how much he is moved by noble deeds, noble ideas. You will get better results if you just watch him laugh. If he laughs well, he's a good man. And so, we all know that we're all aiming towards virtue, and we all go out into the world and we fight our good fight. You and I mean, that's what we're doing in the walled garden, not just you and I, but everyone at the walled garden. That's what we're doing. We have something to fight for. But at the end of the day, we got to put our swords down. At the end of the day, we have to somehow hold the view, while holding the view that everything we do is important, also hold the view that life is not that serious.
Mm.
And
Mm.
it's hard. It's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
hard.
yeah, yeah. It's such a paradox. But you know who is the best at that? And I'll live up to the silliness, but it's Sharon fucking LaBelle. Okay, she she is my hero in so many ways, because she's got that beautiful kind of, it's almost like a Zen like reverence with a touch of irreverence. I tell you, I recently visited her with Jen. We stayed there at one of her cabins for a night, and then we went up to Jen's family reunion at another cabin up in Oregon. But then we came back down, and we're out there walking amongst the redwood trees, and we've just been on a hike with Sharon, which was so beautiful. And Sharon says, I still need to find a tree for you guys to sit in, because there's all these giant trees there, and she wants us to sit underneath one. And we're by the car, and Sharon turns her head and she sees something, and within a second she had started like running over to this tree, and we're like, where's Sharon going? Where the hell is Sharon going? But she's just that person. Something comes to her, she goes for it, and what she did
Yeah.
was she had seen a tree that might be good for us to sit under, so we kind of mosey on over there. But she's that kind of really playful, fun, funny person, such a wit, such a beautiful vocabulary. And her vocabulary it's the perfect balance of like sacred words, holy words. She knows all of the philosophical terms, but she also just makes words up that,
Yeah.
just so silly, or, and she says silly words. And there's something about Sharon that to me is just such a perfect balance of the reverence and the irreverence to life. And I can't help but think it comes from a lot of her Jewish background as well.
Mm.
um, the Jewish culture and religion just holds such a beautiful space for irreverence and silliness and comedy and taking the Mickey even out of God. It's
Mm.
like that is such a healthy, uh, healthy culture.
Yeah.
Nothing is too holy to be made fun of or to joke about. I was listening to Rabbi Sachs, a lecture that he gave, and he's this Jewish rabbi. I don't know if he's still alive yet. I should figure that out. But anyway, one of the things that he said was Jewish happiness is to have something to complain about. And I love it. I love it. You watch people like Larry David,
Yeah,
it's like that's the whole culture. So yeah, it's interesting.
that's
It's so
awesome.
great to have Sharon on our team, somebody who can keep the spirit of silliness with us.
Yeah, and I've noticed the same thing with Sharon. She's very, very deep, very thoughtful. She takes certain things very, very seriously. She has her letters that she writes to people every day, and she's very disciplined about that. Every day she writes this personal letter to someone. It's a practice for her. She takes that seriously, but in talking with her, she's loose, she's fun, she's not tense. And maybe that's the real message here. Like, again, it's this weird thing where maybe if you want to have the biggest effect on people, the most serious effect on people, the best way to be is not serious. Maybe the
Mm,
best way is to be loose, to not be tense, to be, well, to be able to affect them in that way. And we all know, I'm sure, if you've ever been into a team environment, maybe it's the boss. Probably for most people, it would be the boss who's really tense, and they're, because they got so much stress, right? They got so much going on, and they got meetings after meetings, and they're working most weekends. And you like the boss, right? I mean, yeah, he's learning a lot from him. He's this, he's that. But then you got the guy that's kind of like your real mentor, because he's not the boss, and he has a bit more time, so he can actually mentor you properly. And he asks you to go out for a beer on Friday nights, and then
mm.
you ask yourself, well, which one am I more drawn to? And for most people, it's going to be that guy. And the reason, it's not because the other guy is doing less quote quote virtuous work. It's not that he's not, obviously he's working a lot, but maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe because he's so consumed by the fight, he's not loose, he's not relaxed in a way in which he can influence other people. And that
Mm.
seems to be what it is. Like when you talk to Sharon, it's it's relaxed. It's open. It's welcoming. It ideally, or I suppose you could say it's feminine in a sense, right? It's open. It's
Mm.
compassionate. And I just spoke with her yesterday, so this is like really, really new in my mind. But maybe that's the reason. It's not that inherently taking life seriously is bad. It's that if you take it too seriously, you're going to be fighting that battle alone, because
Mm.
we all want to take a Friday off. We all want to go for a beer. We all want to laugh. We all want to be silly. We all want to, do these little things that really, quote, quote, don't matter. But do they really not matter? I
Oh,
think
they
they
matter
do.
so much.
I
Yeah.
think they really do.
One of the first things I did when we came here to California is Jen and I went to a baseball game on a Sunday afternoon at the
Mm.
what is it? It's a stadium in Anaheim. I think it's the Honda Stadium or something like that. But we're sitting up there in the stand and you can see the mountains in the distance, and it's not a huge audience, but we're watching a baseball game in America, the great American pastime. I'm drinking a freedom beer, like
Yeah.
we've got this like a Budweiser or something like that, like freedom. I totally get sold. You put an American flag in the word freedom on anything, it's sold to me. Just because
Yeah.
I love American propaganda. It is my favorite propaganda of all the propaganda in the world, and I think it's right. But
Yeah.
I was sitting there, and I was thinking, I want to do this with a bunch of Stoics. Like
Yeah.
I want to do this with some other. I was having a great time with my wife there. But as a community, and even Sharon says, like, we can learn a lot from religious organizations that really, like, it's community building. Let's go see a play together. Let's go see a movie together. Let's go watch a baseball game together. Let's talk not only philosophy but just life. Like, how are
Mhm.
you? What's going on with you in your life at the moment? It's I honestly think that's where the real opportunity is coming in, especially moving into
Yeah.
this new age of, you know just unlimited bounds on creativity, community building, the software that's available to us today. There's so much great stuff that can help us to build really meaningful communities, and we need to include the profane in those communities just as much as the divine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a quick example, one of the worst things you can do on a first date is explain in excruciating detail what you want in a partner. It's like the biggest turn off ever, right? It's like, what do you do on a first date? Well, you try and have fun. You try and relax. And what you're doing there over the course of hopefully a few dates before you start bringing in how many children you want is you're loosening the person up. You're putting them in a position to be open to taking in some of those more serious matters. And I think it's vital for human connection.
I once had a client who I was mentoring him, and he had a rough time with relationships, but he had a list that he would take to his dates of like what he was looking for in a partner. And I kind of said to him, listen, man, I don't often just give out advice in these sessions. I don't often just tell you what you should do, but you got to rip up that list as soon as you can. Like you got to move away from being so clinical in your approach to human relationships, because you have no idea what you want until you find it, and then it just kind of hits you. Now, that's not to say that it's not a good idea to think about, well, what's my ideal partner? What would be really good for me and for everybody if I could find a really great person? But also, I think that it's the wrong question. It's like, well, who do I have to become in order to, who should I be in order to attract the right kind of person? But it's just interesting you bring that up, because I remember having that conversation and just being like, got to tear it up, man. Let's go. This is, it's not healthy,
Well, if you talk to him again, tell him that personally, I bring an iPad with an Excel spreadsheet. That way you can keep track and you have different tabs, That's the way to do it.
Why not, man? Why not?
But yeah, I think that you have to be open, and it's not to say that you don't have certain qualities that you have to look for, but I think fundamentally what people should be looking for, and you kind of mentioned it there, is you need someone that, first of all, you want to grow with, right? That's really important, but you have to be able to see the divine within them. Not to sound too religious, but when you see someone, what you love in someone is not who they are, but you love them for the potential. You love them for who they potentially could be in the future. And hopefully everyone has that potential. Every single person you meet on the street has a piece of divinity within them, but you can't always see it, you as an individual. And more importantly, you might not be willing to bring that about. I mean, we all only have so much time. There's only so many, good friends we can have. There's only so many, obviously, relationships that we can and should have. So I think part of it is, find someone that's, as Bob Marley would say, that's worth suffering for. Because there's going to be communal suffering in that. That's been my experience for sure, but it's about who is worth it, who's worth the pain, who's worth the suffering. And then all of that suffering being or feeding into who the person is becoming and who you are becoming as a couple. That's the Strong Stoics relationship advice right there.
Yeah. I like that, man. Yeah, totally. And somebody you can suffer with, somebody you can. Yeah, it's funny, that's such a beautiful way, because it seems like a very negative way to look at, how you would choose a partner, but it's true. I mean, you need to be with somebody who everything that could go wrong goes wrong, and you can still find strength in your relationship. I was thinking about this last night, because there's this idea in Mormonism, and I think that this idea kind of flows throughout a lot of religions as well, is just that, your wife or your husband, number one, aside from God, right? And it's almost as if it's trying to say, okay, you've got your relationship with God, which is kind of like most important because it's God. It's the number one, right? And you have to be switched on, and you have to you have to have that fundamental relationship right. But then what's the next closest point of call for you that is going to be the most important relationship in your life? Well, it's your partner or your wife or your husband. Yeah. And then it's almost like it's because, well, they are the next person who is most akin to me because we find a kinship together.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a point that I don't know if it was Tucker Carlson. You know, people can think whatever they want about Tucker Carlson. He's so controversial. And he's such a crackpot. But damn, sometimes he says something wise, and you got to take the wisdom where you can find it. He talked about how we really need to stop caring about so many of the things that we care about and come back to the fact on the ground, which is that your family, your immediate relationships are the most important things in your life because they are the only people who are going to be there for you when everything turns to shit.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just the reality. And even with, you know, philosophers in the walled garden, it's like, I love them, but if I think that personally, I've done a very bad job of in my life of prioritizing my relationships in the right way, and I'm trying to rectify that.
Yeah,
because now I'm starting to wake up to the fact, especially when we see such crazy things happening in the world. Yeah, things could go really bad. And I love you, Brandon, but at the end of the day, if everything turns to shit, Jen's going to be right beside me. My family back in Australia, they're going to be right there for me. My family over here in America, they're going to be right there for me. They're my immediate contact for tragedy. And that's something that I don't know, it's just something to consider. You know, what is the hierarchy of priorities in my relationships? But one last thing that I'll say is the other day I was kind of meditating and writing, and it just occurred to me that, like, how beautiful could life be if your sole job was to make sure that every single relationship that you have with anybody is positive and meaningful and rich and full of life.
Yeah.
You know, somebody like Karen Duffy, who I'm talking with at the moment about all sorts of things, including walled garden projects. But I think about her because she is the most well-networked person I've ever met in my life. It's insane. The people who she has immediate access to, and she's such a beautiful, fun, like Sharon, reverent and irreverent, silly, but also deep, profound, but profane, you know, and and I look at her and I think, wow, she's a person who knows how to build relationships. And that is who she is. She's a network builder. That's so cool. You know, it's so refreshing to come across people like that who are unbelievably skilled at bringing people together and at networking and at fostering relationships and, you know, kindling the spark that could be if you did that with, you know, with another person. So it's, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm very interested in that at the moment, in learning how to be a better networker, be a better relationship builder, and to have deep relationships with as many people as I can, you know?
Yeah. And I think most people should start with the family. And you mentioned that when you started talking, and it's not because of any, you know, traditional view, and, you know, maybe these are the reasons for the traditional view, but the thing about these genetic relationships that you have, as bad as they might be sometimes, they are rare. They're not rare in the sense that nobody has them. I have a mother, you have a mother, 7 billion people on Earth has a mother or had a mother. It's rare in the fact that you can't just go out and get another mother. So your genetic family, these are really rare relationships that you can't just go out and find. Now, the huge benefit that I personally found in cultivating these genetic relationships is the fact that you share genetics with them. And in doing so, you share personality traits, you share ways of thinking. One of the biggest ways that I learned who I was is by examining who my parents are in depth, and then also examining who my sister is and my brother is, because again, they share half my genetics and they're my age. So they have the context of the current environment, which my parents don't have, right? So these relationships, they're tough, and you have, but it's really important to cultivate them. I have the opinion that I think if it takes you your whole damn life, it's worth fighting and arguing and getting on good terms with both your parents. Like, I don't care how bad it is. And there's some exceptions, of course, there's some exceptions. But for most people, if you have an issue with your genetic relationship, keep in mind that you share half their genes. And so in learning who they are, in learning what you don't like about them, you're also going to learn maybe something that you don't really like about yourself. And in doing so, you unlock wisdom, which is, what is my darkness? And all I can say is these are really rare relationships that you cannot go out and get a new one. You can't choose it. Your mother is your mother. Your father is your father. If you have siblings, cannot get just a new genetic sibling, but you can learn who you are by learning who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, learning who you are it is such a process of mutual growth, right? When you're building a relationship with somebody, that you do both learn more about. It's like part of you is reflected in who they are, you know.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because, well, why the hell are you interested in this person anyway?
Right.
Do you even know? Do you even like? I'll tell you, man. Meeting my wife Jen was just the freakiest experience of my life. You know, I'm there on the cruise ship singing a really depressing song called "Don't Worry About a Thing." It's by an Australian singer. The song is essentially talking about, hey, you shouldn't worry about anything in life because nothing's going to turn out right in the end anyway.
There you go. Don't take life seriously.
Yeah. It's all going to turn to shit. That's right. You know, but I'm singing this song and she comes in and, you know, she's looking all beautiful, you know, as she does. And we just, every single night of that cruise, we sat up in the central garden or somewhere on the cruise ship talking after my gig at about 12 midnight until about 5 in the morning, or until one of us just couldn't talk anymore and we had to go to sleep, you know. And the funny thing is, you know, we both there would be no touching at all because I was a crew member and she was a guest. And if I had so much as given her a hug and that was caught on film, the you know, the captain might have knocked on my door in the morning, as they do, said, okay, you got a hearing with the captain, and doesn't matter what port we're in, you're out of here. That was the rules. And so instead, you know, we had a chance for a week to just talk for hours and hours. And for some reason, we just immediately clicked. Everything, every part of us was just immediately clicked with the other person. And what happened, this might be the first time I've told this story on the podcast, but what ended up happening was, so she got off the ship after her cruise, and we had planned to maybe talk off the ship as well. And that didn't end up happening. But I went off the ship. And then as I was getting back on the ship after a little bit of time off, um, I could feel, as I was lining up, I could feel the tears welling up. And I was like, oh no, this is a storm. If I don't get back to my cabin soon, this is going to be really embarrassing. By the time I hit my cabin, man, I have never cried that much in my entire life. It's like meeting Jen unlocked a part of me that was just bottled up. And I just wept for hours thinking about the fact that out of nowhere, I met this incredible woman and we just talked and talked and talked and talked and got to know each other. And that's when I kind of decided, I was like, man, this is a crazy reaction. And we decided to get into a long distance relationship. She was from Texas. I was from Australia. Now we're living over here in California and the rest is history. But there's something about that, seeing it's like, what's happening there? Really, like this
Yeah.
profound thing happening where they are reflecting something that you need back on you, and you're reflecting something that they need back on them. And there's a mutual healing there in that relationship. And I don't know,
Yeah.
for me, like whenever, if there's ever tough times in the relationship or anything, I just think back to them and I think that, you know, there is something so necessary for me in this relationship. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's one of those wild experiences.
That's beautiful, man. That's beautiful.
It's
Great
strange. That's
story.
what it is. Life is full of
Everything is
those
strange.
weird little I'm a very intense person. Yeah. you know?
Yeah, me and Sharon were talking about that yesterday too. We're because people are not always attracted to serious people, and I said, "Well, you don't have to tell me that."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So, yeah, but that's interesting. Beautiful story, man. Should we? I feel like
yeah, we should
we're
probably wrap
well
up, hey?
over an hour.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's been beautiful. What I want to do is I want to make sure that everybody knows what you're going to be doing on the Walled Garden now. We're going to move you into mentoring over the next few weeks, and I think that by the time this comes out, your mentoring profile should be set up. So that should be good. People can head to the Walled Garden, go to the mentoring section. You'll find Brandon there. And if you can't, then you will find him there soon because we're working on it. Um, and you've also got, we need to set up your Grove. And I don't mind just telling people that we're still in that process, but it will be out by the time this episode is out. What do you really want to explore philosophically or intellectually as your contribution to the World Garden?
hmm.
I know I'm putting you on the spot here, man. I don't mean to be like planning stuff here, but it's just like, what's calling
Yeah,
out
yeah.
to you right now?
One of the things I would say that I'm personally most excited for. So you asked about what I'm contributing, but maybe I'm going to start answering this by what I'm hoping to develop in myself is sort of I think what we're all after, which is community.
Mm,
I think we're starting something here that again is one of those things. Is it rare? It's like no, there's lots of communities out there, and there's lots of ones that have been very successful, but maybe it's rare in the fact that it's the one that I'm a part of right now.
mm,
And I think that for me is what I'm hoping to explore. I mean, I think you and I had both interesting starts where our podcast where we started off as solo podcasters, and then over time it sort of progressed into guests and eventually the community that we're building now. So I'm I'm so excited just to kind of get involved into that and help grow that community. To I suppose to use a phrase from it was a movie I can't remember the name with Robin Williams, but I want to play my verse. I want to sing my verse to the song, and that's what I'm most excited about, and that's what I'm hoping to contribute. And I think it's if I can say the one thing that I hope I can hold myself to a high standard of is bringing that just that love of wisdom, that curiosity that I think is at the heart of philosophy to these things, and to be humble. And I don't think it'll be humble given who we have involved here because we have some very, very intelligent people in the community already. But I would say that I'm looking forward to the huge growth opportunity, and I'm simultaneously looking forward to helping the organization grow with
yeah.
that vision in mind.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for the energy that you're bringing to this. Thank you for the passion that you're bringing to it, and for accepting the call. And I can't wait to see where we go with everything. Yeah,
I'm
much love to
excited,
you,
man.
man. Yeah,
Yeah, you too, brother. So thanks for having me on, and I'm looking forward to the next one. I guess this is going to be a regular thing, so I'm really looking forward
sure
to it.
is. I should actually mention, we're we're using the agile project management here, where we kind of throw things at the wall and see
Mhm.
what works. But ultimately, we want these conversations to be available to everybody who's a member of the Walled Garden to attend if they wish. And so this is the first of what will be many conversations between myself and Brandon. And I'll be doing the same thing with every contributor in the Walled Garden. And so if you're interested in joining these conversations, just make sure you go to the Walled Garden, join up, become a member. and contribute to what we're doing. We want everybody's help, and we'll accept any help that we can receive, because we've got an important mission that we're on here. But ultimately, if you're interested in joining these conversations, come along. We'd love to see you, and you'll be able to see the events there on the website. So thanks, Brandon.
Thank you very much, sir. Until next time.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Walled Garden Podcast. Remember that this show is a part of the podcast network of the Walled Garden Philosophical Society. If you consider yourself to be a seeker of understanding, of wisdom, a cultivator of virtue, then we want to learn and grow with you. Just head over to thewalledgarden.com to find out more. We'll see you there, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.